Hello everyone, my name is Amrik and I'm the Director of Customer Success at Dubility, the makers of the SurveyCTO data collection platform. Thanks for joining this installment of our webinar series. We're here today to learn about a gold standard education assessment, the early grade reading assessment. We have a guest with us, Pinaki Jodar from Room to Read. Room to Read are an education non-profit and are experts in the administration of the EGRA assessment. EGRA is now possible to administer natively using the SurveyCTO platform, hence our presentation today. Before we get started, I'm going to paste a message into our chat window. The message contains a number of links that we will share with you also later on via email. So please rather focus on the presentation if you can, but if you are interested to grab these links right away, you can do. Also to share with you, this presentation is being recorded, so it'll be possible for you to review it later and share it with any colleagues to whom you think it would be relevant. The slide deck will also be made available, so don't worry about following everything on the slides necessarily if you're finding there's a lot to keep up with. Okay, so let's get started. So before I hand over to Pinaki, I'll briefly mention the Safe People and Data Initiative. This initiative has been spearheaded by the team at Dubility, and we'd like to grow it through participation and support of users. We're aiming to look beyond technology, obviously still important to us, to focus on best practices for safe data collection, which can involve a mixture of tools and methods. We'd love to hear about how you're adapting and changing your work. If the revisions you're making to your processes fall inside the scope of the Safe People and Data Initiative, if you're keen to share, please get in touch with us. Take a look at the homepage of the initiative and write to us as well if you'd like to share. The initiative homepage is amongst the links I've shared as well. We'll also hear later on about how Room to Read have been adjusting their work and operations in response to the challenges of the year 2020. Briefly, our agenda ahead of us is as follows. I'll hand over just now to Pinaki, who will give us more background on both Room to Read's work and the early grade reading assessment. Following that, I will provide you with a brief demonstration of what EGRA looks like when administered on SurveyCTO. And from there, I'll hand back to Pinaki, who will share some advice about administering this assessment and how COVID-19 has been affecting how an organization like Room to Read operates. So that's the agenda ahead of us. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to Pinaki Jodar. Welcome, Pinaki. Pinaki is the Associate Director for Global Literacy Research, Monitoring and Evaluation at Room to Read. Thanks for joining us, Pinaki.
Thank you, Amrik. Thank you for the introduction and also for organizing this webinar. I hope I am audible to everybody. So, to all the attendees as well as my co-panelists, hello again. I am Pinaki, and as Amrik said, I work with Room to Read and I work with Room to Read's Global Research Monitoring Evaluation Unit. At the beginning, I'll give a very brief introduction about our organization, Room to Read. Room to Read is an international NGO working on the philosophy that world change starts with educated children. We strive to transform lives of millions of children in low-income communities by focusing on literacy and gender equality in education. We implement our programs in collaboration with parents, communities, governments at local, provincial and central levels, and also local partner organizations across Asia and Africa. Till date, our program has benefited close to 17 million children across 16 countries. In these geographies, Room to Read implements its two flagship programs. One is called Literacy Program, on which I would focus a bit more shortly because it has got linked with this particular webinar. Other is called Girls Education Program that tries to ensure that girls can complete secondary level schooling equipped with necessary skills to navigate key decisions in life and realize their potential. So that's a very brief introduction about Room to Read, and if organizations and attendees are interested, they can obviously go through the link that Amrik has kindly posted in the chat box and to know more about Room to Read. So I'll talk briefly about our literacy program also. Through the literacy program, we strive to develop reading proficiency in primary grade children in low-income communities through a school and community-based intervention. By reading proficiency, we mean children should excel in early grade literacy skills like reading fluently with comprehension by end of their grade 2. And B, all primary grade children should develop the habit of reading to become lifelong readers and learners. To achieve these overarching objectives, our literacy program implements interventions that enables teachers to implement evidence-based scientific reading and writing instruction techniques in the classroom to develop early grade literacy skills. Secondly, create child-friendly, well-managed library for all primary grade children in schools to promote habit of reading. And thirdly, develop quality reading materials, QRA, that are essential for both instruction and library interventions under the literacy program. Another common element across all these components of, Amrik, can you please go back to the, yeah. Another common element across all these components of the literacy program is monitoring and evaluation. Early grade reading assessment is an important tool for us in the monitoring and evaluation process. I am going to talk a bit more about early grade reading assessment, or in short EGRA, in next few slides. I am sure many people in this audience are well aware of EGRA. However, this may help others who are new or not used to EGRA. So first I will try to give a brief about why EGRA. It is a well-established fact that learning to read fluently with comprehension at an early age is important to master the art and science of reading. Evidence also show that in addition to health and nutrition, basic literacy is important to break the vicious cycle of poverty, especially in low-income setup. But many children, including those who have attended or completed primary schools, are unable to decipher even basic text in their own language. Evidently, we need an instrument that is customizable across geographies and context to assess children's early grade literacy skills objectively and regularly. However, regional, national or subnational level assessment often do not meet this need. EGRA was developed and subsequently adapted and administered to fulfill this need. And for last few decades, it has been done in more than 100 languages. So what does an EGRA look like? I think this picture in this slide gives you some idea. This is an orally administered in-person assessment of early grade literacy skills that tells us the status of a child's mastery over the 5 essential components of reading, early grade reading, and other important components like writing skills also. And as you can see from this picture, during the early grade reading assessment, a child reads from a particular piece of paper, which we call stimuli, and assessor scores the children's reading results on his or her assessment sheet or tablet screen, depending on the mode of data collection. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about what kind of tests, which are often called subtasks, that can be done part of EGRA to assess these 5 necessary elements of reading as well as writing. This table in this slide presents a list of common EGRA subtasks that are generally done in different languages. Rather than reading through all these subtasks, let me take one example here. Suppose we want to know whether a child can read letters, either the name or the sound, correctly in a language with ease. As part of EGRA, we conduct letter identification test. We give the child a piece of paper containing 100 letters. These 100 letters are arranged in random order, not alphabetically as per the language sequence. We try to include upper and lower case items in these 100 letters. And since many languages don't have 100 letters, we sometimes also repeat some of the items, but those are also randomly placed within the list of 100 letters. And this is presented in the format of a grid in front of the child. Then we ask the child to read as many letters as possible within 60 seconds from this 100 letter grid. After the test, based on the child's performance, we calculate how many letters the child was able to read correctly in 60 seconds. In other words, we calculate letter sound fluency score of a child through this particular letter identification test. There are many subtasks like oral reading fluency and reading comprehension that are very popular across languages. But the subtasks to be included in an EGRA tool must be decided on the basis of linguistic and other specific context-specific features. And this particular table, it represents only the most common elements in the EGRA subtask. There are some other subtasks or new subtasks that are continuously being tried in the field, including our organization also. One example is presented here, which is called sentence choice test, which is basically an alternative measure for reading comprehension delinked from oral passage reading test. That's about the common elements of the EGRA tool that we generally see. And in the next slide, I'll talk a bit more about how we use our EGRA results. EGRA results can be used in various ways. Amrik, you can put all the bullets here. EGRA results can be used for many purposes. For example, teachers can use a customized version of the EGRA tool to know the status of early grade literacy of the students who are present in the classroom. And the teachers can keep on doing it on a regular intervals, which would give them very important information about the child's progress, who is present in his or her classroom. Another example, program implementers like us, donors, or government can use EGRA tool to evaluate the impact of an early grade reading development intervention, and so on. There are so many ways we can use our EGRA results. As mentioned earlier, EGRA is an important tool for Room to Read. Like many organizations, Room to Read used to conduct and collect EGRA data through pencil and paper mode. Then 4 years back, we shifted to electronic mode of EGRA data collection using an app that was specifically created for this kind of timed subtask. Now we are looking for an organization-wide solution for all our M and E data collection system, including EGRA. And this endeavor has led to the collaboration between Room to Read and SurveyCTO. As Amrik has mentioned, SurveyCTO has recently developed a beta version of the EGRA data collection module, and Amrik is now going to give you a flavor of this beta version right now. So over to you, Amrik, for your part of that.
Great. Thank you, Pinaki. That was a really great introduction. It was really nice to hear about why EGRA is important and how it fits into the work that you've been doing. So yes, in this next section, I am going to give you a brief demonstration of what it looks like to administer EGRA on the SurveyCTO platform. So initially, back in the course of history, EGRA would have been administered using a pen and paper and a stopwatch. But of course, digital data collection has a lot of advantages. So some of the audience today are familiar with EGRA primarily, but maybe less familiar with the SurveyCTO platform. So I'll share a little bit of information more for your benefit. SurveyCTO is a digital data collection platform which prioritizes data security, data quality, reliability, and flexibility in its development and in our approach to supporting the platform. Historically, our user base has been situated amongst research organizations, universities, NGOs, governments, and international development organizations for a range of data collection requirements, including but not limited to randomized control trials, program evaluations, and monitoring and evaluation. The platform is generally very flexible, and in fact, EGRA was possible before recently on SurveyCTO, except that it involved the use of a stopwatch or separate timer, because timing activities wasn't natively possible just until recently. However, thanks to new field plugin functionality, which we introduced this year, anyone can dramatically customize how data collection works on the SurveyCTO platform. We've used this new set of capabilities to build an EGRA solution with built-in timer capabilities and optimized button layouts with controls. On the right of the slide, you'll see what EGRA looks like in brief on the SurveyCTO platform. You can see an EGRA subtask presented all at once on a larger tablet-sized screen. And next to that, to the right, you can see the solution adapted to a smaller screen size, offering a paginated view of the same EGRA subtask. Our hope is that the flexibility with screen size offers more organizations the ability to administer EGRA in spite of budgetary constraints. The ingredients in this EGRA solution are a customizable form design, and we supply a sample, which you'll find via our guide to EGRA, and a set of field plugins which are attached to a form. All of this is explained in much more detail in our guide, but I will also demonstrate this for you in just a moment. So if you'll bear with me, I'm just going to quickly change my screen sharing settings. If you could just confirm for me quickly that you can see the Android device screen that I've swapped to. So I'll be discussing what you can see there. For those of you who are not familiar with SurveyCTO, this is the Android application, which is part of the platform used for offline data collection. When you are filling out a form, you'll first open the full blank form menu at the top, which I'm going to tap on to open. Next, you will tap on and open the form that you are working on. So I'm going to open this EGRA form that I want to fill out. And now the form opens. So there's generally a standard introductory screen which you can customize for your own purposes. And don't worry about reading this. You'll be able to try the sample form for yourself. So what I did there was just slide my finger to swipe to the next screen. So similar to what Pinaki was sharing with you, the assessment involves a grid of items. And in the case of the letter identification, it's a grid of 100 letters in non-alphabetical order. You can see different cases here. And it's the task of the child being assessed to sound out each letter and in so doing correctly identify them. It's also common for assessors to first familiarize the child with the task ahead. They might point out some different letters. So for example, at the top you can see T, V, and L. The assessor might ask the child, what's this first letter? And ask them to sound out the letter T. This is just an approximation of what might be in front of the student or child being assessed. I'm going to tap on continue here to continue with the assessment. So here we can see the letter identification subtask on an Android phone. The screen isn't quite large enough to fit the entire assessment on a single screen, but that's okay. In this system, the assessment is paginated. We'll use this next button at the bottom right to keep on moving through the assessment while we fill it out. In contrast, though, if you were to use a large screen tablet, there's a good chance that the whole assessment will fit on a single screen and you won't need to worry about the pagination. So it'll be much simpler. As soon as the child reads the first letter, you should tap on the start button and the timer begins. The default assumption in this grid is that an item was attempted correctly. So you need to mark the incorrect items. So I'll tap on a button. You can see that R in that first row, the button state changes and the letter is struck through and the color changes, indicating an incorrect answer. I'll mark another one and I'll tap on the next button. You can see we're now dealing with rows 3 and 4. I'll mark another incorrect and page forward again. And now we're in rows 5 and 6. I'll mark the whole of row 5 incorrect by first tapping on 5, which is now a question mark, and I'll tap it again. Now that's a quick shortcut to mark the full row incorrect, which you might want to do if a child skips a row in error. Now, the time has just run out. We've reached 60 seconds. You are, as the assessor, supposed to stop the child from continuing. So when the time runs out, you need to tap on the last attempted item, so scoring can be worked out. So I'm going to tap on OK, and I need to pick the last letter or item that the child attempted. Now, logically, this needs to be the last incorrect item or the one following that. So I will pick Y at the start of row 6 as the last attempted item, which we'll use for scoring. So I'm going to tap on Done. Our test is complete. I will now swipe forward again in the form. Here we can see a summary of how well the child did. This is an optional screen. This feature of the form was designed into the form. Essentially, there are a number of fields that draw out data points from the assessment and summarize that data to present in a table. All of this is in the sample form. So you get a sense of how well the child did. You can see the number of letter sounds, You can see the time remaining, the total letters that were attempted, the total correct and incorrect. All right, so let's move on. Just to be clear, in what you just saw, the grid, several EGRA subtasks are executed in this way, including familiar word reading and non-word reading. We're going to take a quick look at oral reading, which looks quite similar, but the buttons are arranged a little differently as if they were a passage. Let's say, so the buttons are a variable width. So I'm going to start this assessment. I'm going to tap on it. And you can see our timer is more generous. In this case, we have 3 minutes prescribed for the whole passage. And as the assessor, you just listen to the child attempting to sound out and pronounce each word, marking only the mistakes that they make. So I will tap on first mistake. I'll continue to listen to the child. I'll tap on the next mistake. You can see that the punctuation are stored on grayed out buttons, which are unresponsive. Those aren't valid selections. So, okay, let's say I've finished this first section and the child is continuing. I'll tap on the next button to proceed. And let's say the child in this example is quite a fast reader. If I want to discontinue at any point, because the child has reached the end, I just tap on the finish button. That needs to be confirmed, because obviously that might be done in error, but I'll tap on yes because I mean to finish the test. Okay, so again, I'm going to swipe forward. And we have another summary screen, prepared in the same way. Because I finished early, all of the words are considered to be attempted. So only the ones that I marked are the incorrect ones, and the balance are the correct word. It's important that your assessors understand that. There are many things to deal with in training, of course. So, okay, again, I'm going to proceed. What we're going to take a look at next is the comprehension component of oral reading. It is common with oral reading to follow up with some comprehension questions. And these comprehension questions are timed as well. There might be different ways of preparing these, but just take a look at what we've done in our sample form. The child gets asked each question and they have a number of seconds to answer. I tap on continue there and the timer starts right away. If the child doesn't answer in time, the software system actually helps you keep time. So the time will run out here and will automatically advance. Perhaps this time around, the child has an answer. I'm going to tap on correct in this case. Maybe I'll tap on incorrect. And you can also mark a non-response. We've also chosen in this design to put the answer in a lighter gray color in square brackets, but that's just for the sample form. You may not do that in practice. So that was our example of comprehension. Let's take a look at the sentence choice. So Pinaki also mentioned this one, and it's another one of making sense of whether a child understands what they are reading or what they hear. Children will, in this particular subtask, evaluate the truthfulness or the correctness of each of these statements. And they'll do so under time pressure. So I'll tap on continue and a timer starts. This assessment is paginated. All the questions you saw there, or the statements, they're divided across 3 pages. So all you do is mark the child's response. This is very similar to a field list in the SurveyCTO platform and a version on that theme. You can tap on no response if you need to. You can swipe forward. I'm actually not going to finish this assessment because I think it's pretty clear about what's happening, but the things to note are the timer, which is continuous across pages. Watch here. So we're now at almost 240, and the timer continues seamlessly between the screens. I'm able to continue tapping on items, and the assessor just taps on these answers. All right, so I'm going to just swipe ahead because I don't see that we need to spend another 200 seconds on these last few. Is our list of answers. This is a summary generated inside the form design. You can see which were marked as true and which were skipped. And for those who are not so familiar with SurveyCTO, what you do at the end of filling out a form is you make sure that it's marked as formalized, and you will save a form and exit it, which sends the data to your server if you have a connection. I'm going to swap back to our presentation. I hope you can all see the presentation again. And just by the way, I have been seeing your questions. We will deal with all of your questions in just a moment. So to be clear, our EGRA offering is currently a beta release. While stable and carefully tested, we recognize that it may benefit from some improvements in terms of look and feel, and possibly even functionality in some cases. We're open to conversations with you on suggestions for improvement. If you're interested in administering EGRA digitally and would ideally like to be using a platform that's flexible enough to meet a broader set of requirements than just EGRA, SurveyCTO might be a good fit for you. Lastly, to share with you, we've also developed a companion early grade mathematics or EGMA assessment, which is also available now. I've also shared EGMA amongst the list of links. But again, just to reiterate, this presentation is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch the presentation again. The slides are being shared, and all of the resources which I have discussed will also be shared. There's also a screen recording which explains much more about functionality in our EGRA presentation. Thanks very much for watching this segment of the presentation. I'm now going to hand back to Pinaki, who has a bit more expert advice to share with us about administering EGRA. And he's also going to share a little bit about how Room to Read have been coping during the COVID-19 pandemic. Pinaki, can I hand back to you?
Sure. Thanks, Amrik. We can go to the next slide. Okay. Thank you, Amrik, for handing over back to me. I should not call this as expert advice. Rather, let's call this as our experience with EGRA. Like I have been mentioning from the beginning that we use EGRA tool for our monitoring and evaluation purpose. It has been guided by our organization strategy. For example, we use EGRA tool to do classroom-based assessment of children's progress against curriculum very regularly. This is part of program output monitoring. And the EGRA tool that we prepared for this purpose is based on the curriculum that we are following. We also use EGRA for program outcome evaluation. Like we want to know what is the impact of our literacy program on children's fluency and comprehension. Here, the content of the EGRA subtask for the evaluation purpose is different from the content of the EGRA subtask that is used for program output monitoring. Maybe the subtask may remain same, but the content is different by the purpose of the object or purpose or the objective that we want to achieve. The key point is how we prepare an EGRA tool for different purposes in different languages. The box in this slide in gray color contains some macro level guidance on how to create an EGRA tool for evaluation that we follow within our organization. And these are like macro level guidance. There are lot many nuanced points within those guidances also. I'll take few examples here. So for example, to create an EGRA tool for evaluation purpose, we need to have a team comprised of local language experts. That is very obvious, but it would be good to have representation from local researchers outside the organization and even government representative also. Having government representative within the EGRA formation tool helps us to build buy-in within the government. Second example, draft EGRA tool should be pilot tested, and it should be pilot tested more than once, more than twice if required. And we should conduct this pilot test in schools that are representative of the literacy status of the geography, not some outlier schools like very high performing schools or low performing schools. Third example, we obviously need to analyze the pilot test results and then finalize the EGRA tool, which we can use for monitoring or evaluation purpose. But while analyzing the pilot test data, just do not rely on usual statistics like mean or standard deviation. Look at the item responses, assess the reliability score, verify the leveling of the tools. In the next slide, I have given some example on this line also. And one important factor is that we need to have a high level guidance on how to create an EGRA tool in a particular language from the very beginning of the exercise. In the next slide, this is exemplified with some particular subtasks. Amrik, can you please go to the next slide? So this particular slide contains some high level guidance that we generally follow to create some of the EGRA subtasks which are very popular, like oral passage reading, and if you can click on the next one, yeah, oral reading and reading comprehension subtasks. As you can see, this guidance contains information on how to create oral reading passage and reading comprehension. It contains information on leveling, which is very important, that decides our goal of the tool. The language specific features like the word limit, syllables, sentences, words per sentences, all these components are covered. And also an overall guidance about type of story that we want to include in the passage. In the bottom section, we have also given some guidance or some examples that we follow on how to create a battery of 5 reading comprehension questions that is linked with the oral reading passage. And these questions can be used for the purpose of testing children's comprehension of the passage. Now, this is what I wanted to talk about our organization, our program, and our experience with EGRA. I'm very grateful that I'm able to make this presentation, and also thanks to everybody for patiently hearing this. But Amrik has also very graciously asked me to talk for a few minutes about Room to Read's work during the period of COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll just give this a flavor in just one slide, so if you can bear with us. So very quickly, at the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, more than 1.5 billion children and youth were out of the school, including students in all 16 countries where Room to Read works. Although school closures interrupted our typical program operations, the Room to Read team strategically pivoted program activities to create distance and remote learning opportunities for children. We designed these programmatic pivots to be both evidence-based and content-specific in order to reach as many children as possible, despite various challenges like lack of internet connectivity, financial hardship, low level of parental engagement, health issues, etc. The bracket on the left-hand side of this slide summarizes the components of our global literacy program model, which I have also presented earlier. Moving to the right, in the second set of brackets, you see how our program components have been adapted in response to school closures and other limitations associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. In general, we have shifted to remote or digital modalities for providing support and learning opportunities. In the far right brackets, you will find examples of the indicator data that we have collected till 31st July 2020. You can see that these are mostly reach focused indicators as this thing, because we are focused on reaching children as of now. But we do hope to do some deep probing on the effectiveness of these pivots at some point in time, hopefully very soon. On this note, let me end my part of this presentation and hand it over again to Amrik. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Pinaki. That was really useful, particularly the guidance about important considerations on designing item sets. I know that's something that your team invest a good amount of detail in terms of the rigor that you approach delivering EGRA and assessing children using this tool. We'll move to Q&A in just a moment with enough time to discuss a number of questions, and I'll have a look in the question feature and in the chat. We'll try not to miss out any of your questions. But just before I do, I would like to briefly share about next webinar event. On September 30th, we have a guest webinar with special guests from ID Insight. We will share some insights and best practice around improving phone survey rates. Phone surveys have, of course, become much more important in 2020, given that it allows investigators and researchers to not necessarily need to make contact in person. ID Insight is a global advisory, data analytics, and research organization that helps the development sector maximize their social impact. Many researchers, including ID Insight, have pivoted to phone surveying. Sometimes response rates for phone surveys can be a bit disappointing, at least compared to face-to-face. However, ID Insight have managed a large number of large-scale telephone surveys in India this year using SurveyCTO integrated with a voice service called Exotel. And they've been reflecting on that experience, and they're keen to share some of their advice about improving phone survey outcomes. So if you're thinking about telephone surveying or have been doing telephone surveying and are interested in what you can do to improve response rates, this next event could be for you. But again, don't worry about finding a link to this. In a day or so, we will be emailed with a list of links, including a registration link for this next webinar event. We'd love to have you as part of our next webinar too.